Nothing has to physically break for a whole country to suddenly get poorer. The factories still stand, the machines still run, the workers still have their skills. Nothing was destroyed. And yet, overnight, millions lose their jobs. Businesses close. Same factories, same people, suddenly far less wealth. Nothing real disappeared. But the money did. Trillions of it, gone, without a single building ever being touched. We're here to ask the simple question behind everything worth anything. Why money? You've probably heard a recession defined like this. 2 quarters in a row where the economy shrinks, 2 3-month stretches of negative growth. It sounds precise, scientific even. But the people who officially call recessions don't actually use that rule. The real definition is vaguer and more honest. A significant drop in activity spread across the whole economy, lasting more than a few months. Notice what that really describes. Not a number on a chart. A mood. A change in how a whole society behaves. So let's drop the textbook line. A recession isn't mainly a number going negative. It's a sudden collapse in confidence that feeds on itself. To understand the fall, you have to start at the top. Every recession is born in a boom. In good times, money is easy to borrow. Banks lend freely, rates are low, the future looks bright. So people borrow. A family takes a bigger mortgage. A business takes a loan to open a second shop. And every borrowed dollar gets spent. And spending is the magic word, because your spending is somebody else's income. The builder you pay can now afford a new car. Money moves from hand to hand, and each pass makes someone feel richer. Confidence rises, and rising confidence makes people borrow even more. The boom isn't just growth. It's a feeling, lifting itself higher with every loan. And then, something spooks people. It's rarely one dramatic thing. Sometimes it's a shock, a crash in one corner of the market, a bank in trouble, a jump in prices. Sometimes it's quieter. A growing sense that things have gone too far, that the good times simply can't last. The trigger barely matters. What matters is the switch it flips inside millions of heads at once. People stop asking, "How do I get ahead?" and start asking, "How do I stay safe?" A family holds off on the new car. A business pauses a hire. None of them are panicking. Each one is just being a little more careful. Sensible even. But here's the trap. When everyone gets careful at once, careful becomes contagious. Now, watch the trap close. Remember the magic rule: your spending is someone else's income. That rule is wonderful on the way up. On the way down, it turns vicious. You spend less to be safe. But your spending was someone's income. So now they earn less. Earning less, they spend less too. And on it goes, down the chain. And it gets worse, because somewhere in that chain sits a business watching its sales fall. It can't pay everyone, so it lays people off. And a laid-off worker spends almost nothing. So the spiral tightens. Less spending, less income, fewer jobs, even less spending. Nothing was destroyed. The factories still stand, but the river of money has slowed to a trickle. This is the part the textbook definition misses. A recession isn't a single event that happens to the economy. It's a loop the economy does to itself. And the strangest thing about it is that no one is in charge. There's no command center, no villain pulling a lever, no one ordering everybody to cut back. Each person is just making a small, sensible choice. Spend a little less, wait a little longer, hold on to some cash, just in case. If you looked at any single one of those decisions, you'd nod along. Of course you'd be careful, if you were worried about your job. Every one of those choices is perfectly reasonable on its own. But here's the cruel twist. Add all those sensible choices together, and they hurt everyone, including the very people who made them. The careful family, the cautious business, the worried worker. Each one helps slow the river they all depend on. Economists call this a self-reinforcing cycle. The fear of a downturn helps cause the downturn. The expectation of hard times is part of what makes the times hard. That's why a recession can feel like it comes out of nowhere, and why it's so painfully hard to stop. It isn't driven by a villain or a single bad decision. It's driven by all of us at once, simply trying to be careful. If you're enjoying this, a quick subscribe means you won't miss the next one. Now, back to it. Now, bring back something from our debt video. In the boom, people didn't just spend, and they borrowed to spend. And borrowed money carries a special danger when the mood turns. Picture a family that bought a house at the top with a large loan, betting their income would rise. Then the spiral hits and one of them loses their job, but the loan doesn't shrink to match. Debt doesn't care how you feel. The payment is the same in bad times as in good. So they don't just cut back, they slam the brakes, desperate to keep up the payments. Multiply that by millions who borrowed in the good years, and the debt built up in the boom becomes the weight that makes the fall so much heavier. And here's the thing. Long before any newspaper used the word recession, you can usually feel it. It announces itself quietly, in small everyday signals. The cafe once packed at lunch now has empty tables. A friend who's between jobs months longer than expected. The project at work that quietly gets paused. The for sale sign that just lingers for weeks. None of it is dramatic. Each one is easy to explain away. Bad luck, a slow season, one unlucky family. So nobody connects them. But line them all up and you're watching the same loop we've been describing. Only now it isn't a diagram on a screen. It's the river of money slowing down. In real time, right outside your window. Long before anyone names it. Let's be clear about what this means for people, because behind every line on a chart is a life. The clearest sign of a recession isn't the growth number, it's jobs. When the spiral tightens and businesses cut back, unemployment climbs. And here's the cruel timing of it. Growth often starts recovering while people are still being laid off. Jobs are what economists call a lagging indicator. They're one of the last things to heal. So the economy can be technically growing again. The headlines can say the worst is past. And yet, for a worker still sending out applications, the recession is very much still on. That gap is why downturns feel so much longer than the official dates ever suggest. A recession isn't really measured in quarters of falling GDP, it's measured in human time. In the months a parent spends looking for work. In the small businesses that close their doors and never reopen. In the plans quietly put on hold, the move, the wedding, the new start. But here is the part worth holding on to. The good news, and it really is good news, is that they end. Most modern recessions last under a year. That's little comfort while you're inside one. But it is a fact, the wave always eventually turns back up. So if a recession feeds on itself, how does it ever stop? Something has to break the loop and get money flowing between people again? Two big forces usually do it. The first is the central bank. It sets the price of borrowing. So in a downturn, it cuts interest rates, making money cheap again, and gently coaxing people back into borrowing and spending. The second is the government. When everyone else is frozen with fear, the government can do the one thing nobody else will. Keep spending, funding projects, supporting incomes, deliberately putting money back into the river that's run dry. Not because it's profitable, but because someone has to move first. Both of those forces are really doing the same job. They replace the spending that vanished, just enough to stop the spiral, and buy time until private confidence comes back on its own. And that is the slow part, the frustrating part. Confidence doesn't return all at once. It comes back one cautious decision at a time. One family that finally buys the car, one business that finally makes the hire, one person who decides it's safe to spend again. Each small yes makes the next one a little easier, and the river starts, drop by drop, to fill back up, until the loop, ever so slowly, begins to turn the other way again. But these tools are not magic wands. Cutting interest rates only works if people are willing to borrow. And in a deep enough fear, they simply won't, no matter how cheap money gets. Government spending can replace lost demand, but it usually means the government itself borrows more, adding to the very debt we talked about. Every lever helps someone, costs someone, and there's a deeper truth. These responses don't create new wealth. They're trying to restart a flow that already exists, to get people confident enough to use the factories and skills that never left. That's the whole game. The machine was never broken. The response is just trying to convince everyone it's safe to start it up again. Here's the idea that should make all of this less frightening. A recession is not a freak accident. It's not a sign that the system is broken or that someone failed. In an economy built on credit and confidence, like the one we explored in our debt video, recessions are a normal, recurring part of the cycle. They are the down slope of the very same wave that gave us the boom. Look across history, and you see them again and again, in every credit-based economy that has ever existed. Boom, then pause, rise, then dip. The same shape, over and over, for as long as people have lent and borrowed and hoped. They are about as built-in as the seasons. Now, calling them normal doesn't make them painless. The lost jobs are real. The fear is real. But seeing a recession as part of the cycle changes what it actually is. A recession isn't the economy failing. It's the economy correcting. Think of it less like a machine breaking and more like a fever. Uncomfortable, even frightening, but part of how the system clears out what isn't working. It's the moment a world that ran on optimism quietly pauses to ask itself one honest question. How much of what we thought we had was actually real? And how much was only ever borrowed confidence? So come back to the question we started with. If nothing physical was destroyed, where did the wealth go? Here's the answer. A lot of that wealth was never quite as solid as it looked. In the boom, the house felt worth more, the business felt worth more, the savings felt safe. And much of that feeling rested on borrowed money and confidence. It was real enough to spend, but it was never fully there. A recession is the moment the economy remembers that, marking down all the value that was only ever borrowed optimism until what's left is closer to what was truly earned. The factories don't vanish because they were real. The borrowed confidence does because it never was. So what does this mean for you if one actually arrives? Because a recession isn't a headline that happens to other people. It's the year your hours get cut, the job offer pulled at the last minute, the house that's suddenly worth less, the savings you're scared to touch. And here's the uncomfortable part. You are one of the millions in the loop. When you get careful, you're part of what slows the river. Even though, for you, being careful is exactly the right thing to do. That's the cruel knot at the center of it. But understanding the loop keeps you steady when everyone else is afraid. You see it for what it is. A wave that rose has to fall and will rise again. And that calm, spread wide enough, is what ends it. So, what is a recession, really? It's not 2/4 of a falling number. It's a society, all at once, getting scared and getting careful. And discovering that being careful together makes everyone poorer. It's the spending river slowing to a trickle, the borrowed confidence draining out, the economy remembering what it actually earned. The factories wait, the skills wait, and slowly confidence comes back, and the wave begins to rise again. But notice what the rescue actually requires. To fight a downturn, central banks and governments push more money into the system, on purpose. And most of the time, it works and quietly fades. But that raises a darker question, hiding just past the edge of this one. What happens when a country is so desperate to escape the pain that it doesn't stop? When it prints and prints and prints, to pay its debts, to calm its people, until the money itself begins to die in their hands. Because a recession is a currency catching a cold. The next story is what happens when it catches something far worse. Why do whole currencies collapse? Sometimes in a matter of weeks. If you like this one, hit like and subscribe. Got a topic you want us to break down? Drop it in the comments. We're here to answer the simple question behind everything. Why money?